Sabrina leaned close and whispered in my ear before shoving me hard into the river. The shock of the cold water stole the air from my lungs as I fought to stay afloat. When I looked back, I saw my son standing on the boat, his face calm, almost pleased. That moment told me everything. This was no accident. My name is Helen Marshall. I'm 66, a widow, and a mother of one. 2 years ago, I lost my husband Thomas, and with him came the weight of running the logistics empire we built together. After his passing, everything was left to me, a fortune worth billions. It was never easy, but what hurt more was realizing my own son looked at me as a source of wealth rather than family. So when Michael called that morning, speaking warmly for the first time in months, I wanted to believe it was real. He invited me on a boat trip, just the three of us, him, his wife, and me. I chose a navy dress my husband once adored and arrived at the dock with hope in my heart. Michael greeted me with a stiff hug, while Sabrina's smile carried something cruel I chose to ignore. The day seemed peaceful as the river sparkled under the sun, but beneath that calm was betrayal waiting to strike. I had no warning when Sabrina's hands shoved me into the water. My body screamed with pain, my hip still healing from surgery, my dress dragging me down. For a terrifying moment, I thought this was the end, that my life would be erased in silence, left to sink under the current. But I refused to give up. I kicked free, broke the surface, and gasped for air. That's when I saw the boat moving away, Sabrina already on the phone, Michael not even turning to look back. His indifference cut deeper than the icy water. Just when I thought my strength would give out, a fishing trawler appeared. An older man and a teenager pulled me aboard, wrapping me in a blanket that smelled of the sea. My teeth chattered as I lay on their deck, stunned, shivering, and heartbroken, not just from the river's cold, but from the truth that my own son wanted me gone. No, I gasped, clutching Frank's arm. It was my family. They tried to kill me. He studied me quietly, his gray eyes sharp, not judging, just calculating. His grandson, Tyler, looked horrified but couldn't stop staring at me. I'm Frank Doyle, the man finally said in a gravelly voice. This here's my grandson. We came out early to fish, but looks like we caught something else instead. I gripped his sleeve desperately. Please, you can't tell anyone you found me. Not yet. Frank frowned, his brow creasing. That's a hell of a thing to ask. You in trouble? Not trouble, I whispered, my voice trembling. A war, and if they know I survived, they'll finish the job. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he gave me a slow nod. Sometimes the right thing isn't what the law says. Fine, we'll say it was driftwood we saw. But you'd better tell me everything. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. My body was still shaking, but my mind felt sharper than it had in months. They think I'm dead, I said softly. And I'm going to let them think so, until I destroy them. 4 days later, I stood hidden under the shadow of an old oak tree at Greenwood Cemetery. A black veil borrowed from Frank's late wife covered my face. From where I stood, I had a perfect view of my own funeral. The casket was polished silver, absurdly expensive, and completely empty. Rows of chairs stretched before it, some filled with mourners who cared, others with people who only came for the spectacle. At the center of it all stood Michael and Sabrina, dressed in flawless black, their performance of grief so polished it could have been staged. Michael's eyes glistened as he shook hands and accepted condolences. Sabrina dabbed delicately at her cheeks with a silk handkerchief. To anyone watching, they were grieving children. To me, they were liars, basking in the sympathy of a crowd that believed I was gone. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. Reporters circled at the edges, cameras flashing, recording every moment. I had already seen the headlines, the stories written about my tragic death. The newspapers had already built the story. According to the Trenton Times, I was just another victim of age and fragility. Michael was quoted saying I had shown troubling signs of confusion in the months leading up to my supposed accident. Sabrina pushed the tale even further, sobbing to the press about her fear that one day I might wander off and never return. The narrative was fixed. I wasn't a woman betrayed by her own family, I was painted as a fading mind who drowned by accident. I scanned the rows of mourners from my hiding place. My neighbor Mrs. Dalton wept openly, friends from church sat solemnly, and even the doctor who had performed my hip surgery stood with his head bowed. Their grief was genuine, and that made the lies cut even deeper. My death had become theater, their pain turned into fuel for Sabrina and Michael's rise. Then I noticed something unusual. My longtime lawyer wasn't present. Neither was my accountant, and my financial advisor, who had guided Thomas and me through decades of decisions, was also absent. These were the people tied directly to my fortune. Why would they not show up at the funeral of the woman whose wealth they managed, unless they were playing other roles in this scheme? The pastor's words blurred in the distance as Sabrina leaned delicately into Michael's shoulder, her posture perfect for the cameras. She looked beautiful, tragic, almost saintly, every movement rehearsed to sell her image. It struck me then, she wasn't crying for me. She was performing for legitimacy, building her new life as the grieving heiress. I pressed my nails into the bark of the oak tree, steadying myself. Let them bury an empty casket. Let them call me senile, lost, and gone. While they spun their tale to the world, I stood only a few yards away, alive, watching, and waiting. That night, as the echoes of my own funeral still haunted me, I made a choice. If I wanted the truth, I had to go back to the house that once belonged to me. Frank drove me quietly to Princeton, where the Marshall home still stood like a monument to everything Thomas and I had built. 35 years of laughter, Christmas mornings, and late-night talks lived inside those walls. But now it belonged to Michael and Sabrina. I had signed it over after Thomas's death, foolishly believing family was stronger than greed. It was close to midnight when we arrived. The street was quiet, porch lights flickering here and there. My hand trembled as I slid the old brass key into the back door. Michael had never asked for it back, why would he? As far as he knew, I was buried in the Delaware. The lock clicked, and a shiver ran down my spine as I stepped inside. The air smelled different, expensive cologne, harsh cleaners, something artificial that masked what the place really was. It no longer felt like my home. I crept through the rooms with the flashlight Frank had given me. White sheets covered much of the furniture, but underneath I saw leather couches and an entertainment system far beyond anything I'd ever allowed Thomas to buy. The kitchen counters held bowls of imported fruit, wine bottles with labels I didn't recognize. The refrigerator hummed, full of fresh groceries, organic vegetables, French cheese, and even baby formula. My pulse quickened. Upstairs, Thomas's old study was no longer the orderly space he'd kept. Papers and binders covered the desk in stacks. At the top sat a folder stamped in bold letters, Project Helen. My stomach dropped. Inside were medical reports, pages describing supposed memory loss, hallucinations, and decline I had never experienced. Some documents bore forged signatures, others appeared authenticated by doctors I'd never met. Notes described incidents that had been staged, an appointment, forgotten, medications, mixed up, an evening where I supposedly wandered off. I remembered them all now. Sabrina whispering the wrong date, Michael switching my pill bottles. Every slip they accused me of had been engineered. They weren't just stealing my fortune. They were rewriting me. With trembling hands, I snapped photos of the evidence using the disposable camera Frank had given me. That's when I heard it, a sound so soft and fragile it stopped me cold. A baby crying. The thin wail drifted from the second floor, winding through the hall like a ghost. My breath caught. Michael and Sabrina had always sworn they never wanted children, that their ambitions left no room for family. Yet here I stood, in the shadows of my stolen home, listening to the unmistakable cry of a child. Whose baby was in my house, and why were they hiding it? I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding as the cries grew louder, echoing through the dark rooms. For a split second, I wondered if my exhaustion and grief had created the sound, but it was real. I crept up the staircase, every step groaning like a warning. The cries led me to the guest room, the one Sabrina had always complained about because it smelled old. The door stood slightly open. I nudged it wider and stopped cold. The room had been transformed into a nursery. The old wallpaper was gone, replaced with soft clouds painted across pastel walls. A white crib stood against the far corner, draped with a delicate canopy. Shelves of stuffed animals and unopened toys lined the walls, glowing faintly in the dim light. And there, swaddled in an expensive blanket, lay a newborn. His tiny face was red, his cries sharp with need. My knees nearly buckled beneath me. Michael and Sabrina had never once mentioned a pregnancy, and just days earlier on the yacht, Sabrina's figure had been slim, flawless, not that of a woman who had recently given birth. So whose child was this? I took a cautious step toward the crib, but the sound of headlights sweeping across the window froze me. A car door slammed outside. Panic jolted through me. Michael and Sabrina were home. Clutching the disposable camera against my chest, I darted down the stairs and slipped out the back into the garden just as their voices drifted through the front door. My lungs burned as I ran until I reached the corner where Frank's old pickup waited. I stumbled inside, gasping for breath. There's a baby, I choked out. In the house. A newborn. Frank's eyes widened in shock. What? They're hiding a child, I whispered. I don't know whose, but it isn't theirs. His jaw tightened as he started the engine. That's not just greed anymore, Helen. That's something darker. He was right. I needed answers. And the next morning, Frank introduced me to someone he trusted, a private investigator named Laura Kane. Laura Kane was sharp-eyed, patient, and carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent years unraveling other people's secrets. She sat across from me, listening carefully as I poured everything out. But when I mentioned the baby, her expression hardened. I know a place that fits this pattern, she said quietly. A private clinic just across the state line. Discreet. Very expensive. They specialize in surrogacy. Within days, Laura came back with confirmation of my worst fears. The infant I had found in that nursery had been born only 3 weeks earlier. The surrogate mother, a 17-year-old runaway named Anna Rivera from Pennsylvania, had died suddenly during delivery. The records called it cardiac arrest. But Laura's voice was sharp with doubt. Healthy girl, no complications, too convenient. I stared down at Anna's photo, a child herself, smiling timidly at the camera. My stomach turned. Michael and Sabrina hadn't just stolen my money, they had stolen a life. The file Laura handed me felt like a stone crushing my chest. This was arranged, I whispered, my hands trembling around the photograph. Michael and Sabrina aren't clever enough to orchestrate something this elaborate. Laura nodded. Exactly. Clinics like this don't just let minors walk in off the street. There's always someone pulling the strings, a handler, a fixer, someone with power who makes the paperwork look clean. The following week, Laura dug deeper, combing through property records, court filings, and financial trails tied to the clinic. One name surfaced again and again, like a shadow etched across every page: Claudia Mercer. An estate attorney in Newark, Claudia's reputation was pristine on paper, polished, respected, frighteningly efficient. Officially, she specialized in guiding wealthy families through inheritance disputes and transitions. But Laura uncovered something darker hidden beneath that mask, a pattern that suggested Mercer's influence reached far beyond legal documents. Laura spread a series of photographs across Frank's kitchen table, her voice steady but edged with anger. She explained what she had uncovered: dozens of elderly clients who had died under circumstances that seemed tragic on the surface, but far too convenient when viewed together. She's running a network, Laura said firmly. Your son and daughter-in-law are just pawns. Mercer recruits greedy relatives, manufactures evidence of mental decline, and clears the way for inheritance. I've tracked at least 20 suspicious deaths tied to her clients in the past 5 years. The pictures chilled me to the bone. Claudia Mercer stepping out of gleaming luxury cars, shaking hands with men in pressed suits, slipping discreetly into hospitals and private clinics. Always present in the shadows, never directly linked to the deaths. So she's the mastermind, I whispered, my voice trembling. And Michael delivered me right into her hands. Laura tapped one of the photos, a grainy shot of Claudia leaving the very same clinic where Anna Rivera had died. Witnesses say she oversaw the birth personally. The baby was delivered. Anna never walked out alive. I pressed a hand to my mouth. The betrayal of my son had already torn me apart, but this was something monstrous. They think you're dead, Laura continued. Mercer is moving fast. She's already pushing probate through the courts. Within weeks, your estate will belong to Michael, Sabrina, and that baby. My throat tightened. She'll kill again if she has to, won't she? Laura didn't flinch. She already has. And if she learns you survived, she won't stop until you're gone for good. The weight of it pressed down on me like a shroud. My son was no longer just greedy, he was entangled in a machine that devoured the vulnerable, laundering murder into inheritance. For the first time since being shoved into the river, I felt real fear. Not just for myself, but for anyone else who might already be in Mercer's sights. For that baby upstairs in my old house, alive, but living on borrowed time, the decision came to me one sleepless night at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table. I couldn't keep running. If Claudia Mercer was the spider at the center of this web, then I had to step into it myself and force her into the open. Laura argued against it. Frank outright hated it. But deep down, we all knew there was no other way. Mercer was too careful, too insulated, to ever expose herself. She needed to believe I was vulnerable, broken, desperate, easy prey. Only then would she reveal herself. And when she did, every word would be captured. Laura arranged the surveillance. Hidden recorders tucked into the walls, tiny transmitters disguised as everyday objects. Frank worked his contacts and secured a team of federal agents who would wait nearby. My job was the most dangerous of all. I would confront Michael and Sabrina face to face in the very house they had stolen, knowing Mercer would not be far behind to finish what she had started. The evening arrived like a storm I could not avoid. I slipped into the Princeton house just before dusk, every creak of the floorboards echoing through my chest. I settled into Thomas's old armchair, the same chair where he had once sat with his morning paper, as though reclaiming that sacred space could give me strength. That was where I would wait for them. That was where I wanted them to see me first. At exactly 7 o'clock, the front door opened. Michael froze in the doorway, the keys slipping from his hand and clattering to the floor. His face drained of color as if he had seen a ghost. "Hello, darling," I said evenly, keeping my voice calm despite the tremor in my bones. "Did you miss me?" Sabrina's scream tore through the air, high and raw, and for a moment I thought she might collapse. Michael didn't move. He simply stood there trembling, staring at me as though the grave itself had rejected me. And then, another presence shifted the air. Claudia Mercer stepped into the room, her arrival quiet but commanding, as if she had orchestrated the entire scene. Her tailored suit was immaculate, every detail precise, her expression cool and appraising. She looked at me not with shock, but with calculation. The spider had entered her web. "Well," Claudia said, her tone sharp as glass, "the woman who refuses to die." She placed a leather portfolio on the coffee table with deliberate calm, glancing at me as though I were nothing more than an inconvenient delay in her schedule. "This is unwise, Mrs. Marshall. Very unwise." I folded my hands neatly in my lap. Is it unwise for you to sit here and admit what you've been doing?" Her lips curved into a thin smile. "You think you've cornered me, but I provide a service. Families like yours, your son, your sweet daughter-in-law, they want freedom from burdens. I make it clean, efficient, legal." She lifted her chin slightly, her voice dripping with poisoned reason. "Call it a state acceleration if you like. The old pass peacefully, the young inherit sooner. Everyone wins." Her words were venom wrapped in silk. Michael's throat bobbed as he swallowed, and Sabrina's fingers clutched his arm with white knuckles. "You've murdered people," I said, leaning forward, my voice steady despite the fury burning inside me. "Dozens. And tonight, the world is going to hear you say it." Unseen in the shadows, the tiny microphones blinked their red lights, capturing every word. And then, right on cue, the house exploded into chaos. Windows shattered as agents stormed in from every direction. Boots thundered across the hardwood, shouts filled the air, and the metallic snap of handcuffs cut through the madness. I sat frozen in the armchair, every nerve alive, as the storm of justice finally broke over the house I had once called home. Claudia Mercer tried to run. She lunged for the kitchen, her expensive heels skidding across the polished floor. She didn't make it 6 feet before 3 agents tackled her to the ground, her leather portfolio scattering open across the floor like broken wings. Michael and Sabrina stood rooted to the sofa, stripped of their practiced composure. Their faces were pale, their hands trembling, the game they thought they had mastered collapsing around them in an instant. "Claudia Mercer," one of the agents barked, voice like iron, "you're under arrest. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, wire fraud, and elder abuse." The agent's voice was firm, final. Claudia's lips curled in a defiant smirk, but she said nothing. Then the agents turned to Michael and Sabrina. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. My son's face drained of color as they read him his rights. His eyes flicked toward me, wide and desperate, silently begging. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it had." The storm that followed lasted months. Claudia Mercer was convicted on every count, sentenced to life without parole. Her empire collapsed like a house of cards, dragging down doctors, lawyers, even a judge who had been on her payroll. Michael and Sabrina cut plea deals, 25 years for him, 20 for her. Everything they had tried to steal was stripped away. Yet the most important chapter of this story wasn't written in a criminal courtroom. It was written in family court, in a quiet chamber where I stood holding a baby who had been born into lies. Ana Rivera's child. I looked down at him, his tiny face pressed against my shoulder. His dark eyes studied me with a seriousness that seemed far too old for someone so small, as if he already understood what had been lost and what was at stake. "His name will be Samuel Rivera Marshall," I told the judge. "Rivera, for the young mother who gave him life. Marshall, for the family who will love him, not use him. The gavel struck, and just like that, custody was granted. Samuel was mine. 5 years have passed. Samuel is no longer the fragile infant I first held in that courtroom. He's a boy full of questions, full of laughter, his spirit unshaken by the shadows of his past. He knows the truth. He knows his birth mother was a brave young girl who gave everything so he could live. He knows the people who once claimed him were not family at all, only thieves blinded by greed. Most importantly, he knows that love, real love, is a choice, not something bound by blood alone. Sometimes, when I tuck him into bed at night, the memory of the river still rises in me. I remember the icy pull of betrayal, the feeling of being dragged under and left for dead. But then I see Samuel's face, safe and smiling, and I remember why I fought so hard to survive. Family is not defined by who shares your name. Family is the ones who choose you, who protect you, who stand beside you when the current rises. That, I've learned, is the only inheritance that ever truly matters. This powerful true-to-life story shows how betrayal, greed, and hidden crimes almost destroyed a family. A mother's courage exposed a dangerous network and brought long-awaited justice. Yet the greatest victory was not in the courtroom, it was in giving little Samuel a safe home and a future built on love. The lesson is clear. Family isn't just about blood, it's about loyalty, sacrifice, and the people who stand by you when the storms of life rise. Real love is the only inheritance that truly matters. Thank you for following this powerful true story of betrayal, justice, and survival. Remember, family isn't just blood, it's the people who truly stand by you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more real-life tales that inspire, warn, and move us all. Your support keeps these stories alive. Disclaimer: this story is a rewritten narrative created for educational and entertainment purposes. While inspired by true-to-life themes, names, characters, and certain details have been adapted to protect identities and avoid copyright issues.